Morning, everybody. One of my great nerdy fascinations in life is musicology. Musicology defined my undergraduate experience in college, and even though I don't officially do scholarly work in musicology anymore, what I learned then has shaped how I think about music today. And how I think about music is how I think about a lot of things. Simply put, musicology is the study of music. Musicologists don't always perform the music they study, but instead read the music for its context. Musicologists are interested in how music is situated in culture, how a piece of music relates to other pieces of music, and how composers develop their idiosyncratic styles. I spent a lot of time with, even more specifically, historical musicology, which is the study of the history of music and how music has changed and grown through the ages. I love studying composers and songwriters and how they influence each other and celebrate each other. I wrote an undergraduate thesis on this guy. His name is Ralph Vaughan Williams. He was born in 1872. The L in his name is not a typo. It looks like Ralph, but he says it Ralph. He was an English composer, and he influenced me in a whole bunch of ways. He loved choral music, and I loved choral music. He loved writing in parallel fifths, and I could never understand why parallel fifths were a mistake. That was only for Dr. Bruschi. He felt inadequate in his music studies. I felt inadequate in my music studies. He has two last names, and when I got married, I decided that I also would have two last names. Moreover, Ralph Vaughan Williams was interested in musicology. He was fascinated by the way folk music traditions had influenced English music. That was a sign to slow down. When I trip over my words, it's a sign to slow down. Today, we think of folk music as the work of people like Woody Guthrie and Joni Mitchell in the mid-20th century. But before the word folk referred to that modern genre, folk music was simply what we called music that was shared from person to person without being written down. Folk tales, folk music, folk dancing, these are all things that were not recorded, but rather remembered. Think about Row, Row, Row Your Boat. If you know that song, how did you learn it? Did you see it written and then perform it from sheet music? Did you see a composer notated? Probably not, because that's part of a folk music tradition that's passed down from person to person. We don't know who wrote it. It doesn't have a composer. Folk songs were sung in a village square by travelers on horseback passing through to entertain locals, by passengers on a ship's crew to the crew in the dark of night, and by parents rocking their children to sleep. Music like this makes its way into our consciousness. It finds its way into whatever part of our brain is responsible for making us feel nostalgic. Vaughan Williams, seeking to learn what made English music English, thought folk songs might be at the center of that question. He was tired, in his view, of English music that sounded German. So early in his career, when he wasn't composing, he traveled around England collecting folk songs. To collect a folk song, Vaughan Williams needed to meet people and ask them to sing songs for him. When they agreed, as they sang, he notated, he wrote down what he heard, and he recorded the person who sang it to him, the location, and the date. He was part of a group of people around the turn of the 20th century who were working to define and cite the folk music tradition. Vaughan Williams wanted to know where this music came from so he could celebrate its origins. This work to collect and catalog English folk songs helped him to find his voice as a composer. His teachers in school had laughed at him for using folk tunes in his music, but his celebration of the music of his people and his dedication to learning where it came from turned him into one of the most influential composers in English history. So I was inspired by Ralph Vaughan Williams. He sent me down my scholarly and eventually professional path in music and singing and music teaching. To give you a bit of a sense of where it all started for me, here is me as a young aspiring pianist, age 5, sitting at my grandfather's piano and looking very 90s professional. I didn't yet know how to play the piano there. I just sat behind it and pretended I knew how to play the piano because I loved when my grandfather sat down and played. So after those humble beginnings, I sang in high school. I went to college to be a biologist and decided to change my major to historical musicology. I ended up studying Vaughan Williams, and then found my way to be a teacher and a musician and a choral conductor. I continued to think a lot about musicology and music and what it means to be original as a musician. Sometime in the late 20-teens, I decided to work on a piece of music with some of my students, and maybe you'll recognize that piece of music.
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'ma get a scholarship to King's College. I probably shouldn't brag, but dag, I'm amazed and astonished. The problem is I got a lot of brains but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard with every word. I drop knowledge. I'm a diamond in the rough, a shining piece of coal, trying to reach my goal. My power of speech unimpeachable. Only 19,
It's a listening
my mind is
exercise,
older.
not a talking
These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I've learned to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish. I walk these streets famished. The plan is to fan this spark into a flame. But damn, it's getting dark, so let me spell out the name. I am the A-L-E-X-A-N-D-E-R. We are meant to be a colony that...
So that was, as many of you probably recognized, My Shot, which is the fourth song from the musical Hamilton, famously conceived of and written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Hamilton is Miranda's magnum opus. It's a piece that could arguably count as the culmination of an artist's life's work, and he premiered it when he was just 35 years old. It is complex and profound. It is truly his original work. It's in his voice. He played Alexander Hamilton in the initial Broadway run. He is the one whose name is on the Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical and Best Original Score, and he's the person who won the Pulitzer Prize in Drama. And yet, in this work that is strong enough to define an artist's career, I noticed something in the sheet music for My Shot. Next slide. So I'm used to looking at sheet music, but what you may notice about this sheet music is that there's a whole lot of text at the bottom, and I wasn't used to seeing that. So let's zoom in on that text. Next slide. I'll read it to you because it's still small. It starts with My Shot, Words and Music by Lin-Manuel Miranda with Albert Johnson, Quechuan Waliek Muchida, Austin Harvey Jr., Roger Troutman, and Christopher Wallace. Copyright 2015, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on. I had to look some of these names up. Albert Johnson and Quechuan Waliek Muchida are better known as Prodigy and Havoc, who make up the hip-hop duo Mobb Deep. Austin Harvey Jr. is a hip-hop record producer who produced the Notorious B.I.G. and LL Cool J. Roger Troutman was a funk synth player and frequent hip-hop collaborator. And Christopher Wallace is better known as the aforementioned Notorious B.I.G. The credits go on to list some specific songs quoted. Shook Ones Part 2 from Mobb Deep, Going Back to Cali by LL Cool J, and even a song from the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical South Pacific, which premiered in 1949. So Lin-Manuel Miranda's name is on the musical, but he wanted to make sure there were lots of other names on this musical with him. In an interview with Billboard magazine in 2020, Miranda talked about including influence from Mobb Deep, Notorious B.I.G., and DMX. He said, next slide, "They write so brilliantly that they transcend their circumstances, and they change the world literally through the power of their pen and their delivery and their oratory. That's the fundamental idea in it. That's why it's such a love letter to hip-hop. I want the kids who just know only musical theater, when they pick up their liner notes, they see contains a sample from Notorious B.I.G. If you like this musical, you owe it to yourself to listen to the hip-hop that maybe you weren't even listening to, because that's the reason this exists, is my love for hip-hop." Like Vaughan Williams was tired of English music sounding German, Miranda was tired of musical theater sounding like it had never made it past Wicked, and like it lived in a world where hip-hop didn't exist. He had started down the hip-hop fusion path with In the Heights and took it to a new level with Hamilton. And it's no wonder that Lin-Manuel Miranda decided to celebrate his influences. Celebrating musical collaborations is central to hip-hop. At a dance party in the Bronx in New York City in August of 1973, DJ Kool Herc put 2 copies of the same record on 2 separate turntables. He dropped the needle at a specific percussion break in the song on the first turntable, and he let it play. He then queued up the same percussion break on the second turntable, and just as the break ended on the first one, he started the second turntable. So he made this sort of infinite dance break, and he made the party happen. I lost my place. Found it. This is the genesis and the ethos of hip-hop. Know your music, find a tool that works, and work with what you have. Kool Herc didn't have a sampling pad or Ableton or a library of predefined samples. He had 2 copies of the same record, and he had an idea. Soon, fellow DJ Grandmaster Flash started refining this approach. Grandmaster Flash was known for impeccable taste, a vast music collection that he knew backwards and forwards, and his super precise timing. Then MCs, or Masters of Ceremonies, who helped DJs hype up the crowds, started to use their microphones not just for hype, but also for a new type of freestyle poetry. That poetry was by turns rich and nuanced and poignant and raunchy and vicious and hilarious. Hip-hop began and continues as a genre that samples and celebrates other music, adding another level of artistry and imagination and a new set of skills to create these entirely new musical ideas. In 1979, so Kool Herc was 1973, we're now in 1979, welcome to music history class with Mr. Huntington. A group called the Sugar Hill Gang released a single called Rapper's Delight, which was the first full-length rap song to be commercially released. When Rapper's Delight got some traction and hit the Billboard Top 40, the Sugar Hill Gang was threatened with a lawsuit because the group that they sampled, which was Chic, wanted the Sugar Hill Gang to stop taking credit for their song. Sugar Hill Gang had sampled their song. The group who wrote the song said, you can't do this, you can't make money off this, you can't take credit for it. So they figured out how to solve the problem, and it's just like Lin-Manuel Miranda did a few decades later. The Sugar Hill Gang gave Chic a songwriting credit, and they gave them a cut of the royalties. They acknowledged that something like Rapper's Delight was really a sort of asynchronous collaboration between 2 groups of musicians. Hip-hop had taken one piece of music and turned it into something entirely new. So at its origins, from the very beginning, hip-hop music is a celebration of the way artists can celebrate the work of others through a new creative process. How many hip-hop songs do you know that have a feature verse? The feature verse is integral to the genre, and it's a way of bringing in new fan bases and giving a leg up to young talent. Feature verses are a way for artists to support other artists. I am not a hip-hop expert. I don't stand up here pretending to be a scholar of hip-hop. There are a lot of people in this room who know a lot more about hip-hop than I do, no doubt. I'm here to draw this kind of dorky line from Rafe Vaughan Williams to Lin-Manuel Miranda to modern hip-hop to make this connection in the Academic Integrity Chapel Talk that I think, citing your sources, is a little bit like having a feature verse on a track. I think it's a little bit like Lin-Manuel Miranda giving a songwriting credit to Mobb Deep and the Notorious B.I.G. I think it's a little bit like Rafe Vaughan Williams trying to collect and preserve and cite the music of his country so he could be sure of what he was referencing when he used those tunes in his music. I'm here to suggest that you maybe try to be like Rafe Vaughan Williams, or like Lin-Manuel Miranda, or like the Sugar Hill Gang, and like every hip-hop A-lister who does a feature verse on a track for a young upstart. I'm here to invite you to celebrate collaboration and the way that it makes everyone better. The nuts and bolts of this is that it's connected directly to the community pledge here at Brooks, which you'll all sign next Tuesday. And the school prefects have agreed to help remind us of what that pledge says. So if we could go to the next slide, and then Zach, start us off.
As Brooksians, we start from a place of goodwill and respect, and we strive to earn and foster each other's trust.
Relationships and community we build together makes Brooks School a meaningful educational experience.
We individually and collectively commit to the school. By signing my name, I pledge that
you can trust me to respect you, including your identity, well-being, and right to think freely.
You can trust me to respect your property.
You can trust me to contribute to safe and productive learning and living environments.
You can trust me to conduct myself with academic integrity.
This means I will indicate when I receive help on an assignment. You can trust me to be empathetic, honest, and trustworthy as a custodian within and beyond our community.
Thanks, prefects. Next Tuesday morning at the start of advisory time, you'll all sign that community pledge. So even if you have signed it before, we have new pledge documents this year, so you'll all sign it, even if you've signed it before. When you pick up that pen, I want you to think about the weight of what you're signing into. We are a community that is built on relationships that rely upon you being authentic. In the words of Jay-Z, you can feel when something's authentic, and you can feel when it's not. Your signature on the pledge will hang alongside your classmates' signatures in the atrium of the Science Building. When you sign that pledge, you are committing to doing your own work. And when given permission to rely upon the work of others, you are promising to give credit where credit is due in every academic endeavor all the time. If you research, you need to cite. If you collaborate, you need to indicate that you've done so. When you operate outside of those expectations, we will likely call it cheating or plagiarism. When you complete a quiz, test, lab, or paper, you must write or type "This is my honest work" on that assignment. If you received help from the Learning Center or a parent or a dorm parent or a tutor or teacher or peer, you need to acknowledge their assistance on the document that you hand to your teacher. Just write, "I received help from," and then the people you received help from. Each department that you work with will share their preferred citation method, and each of your teachers will have a citation resource available to you in OnBrooks. You may make mistakes, and that's okay. It's part of learning. We are asking you to try your best to celebrate collaboration and communicate when you don't understand. We spend a lot of time talking about research and citation and academic integrity in terms of rules, things you must do, things you may not do, and those are important. But as you move forward this year, I would like you to start thinking about citation as an opportunity to celebrate intellectual collaboration. When someone or something gives you help to complete an assignment, we all get better when you acknowledge that help. The folks who read your paper have extra context for how you arrive at your conclusions, they learn how you think, and they learn about the source that you use. When you cite, you get to take a moment to situate your knowledge in context, which can also help you consolidate that knowledge and connect it to other learning. In his 2004 song, Bridging the Gap, the rapper Nas features his father, the singer and cornet player Oludara. They talk about the development of hip-hop and the way older styles, particularly styles taken from the Black and African American traditions, influenced both Nas and his father. There's an important line in the text of that song: "Keep integrity at every cost." Have a great year. Thank you.